Hello, STEMAZINGKids, and welcome to our next session, which is called Creative Convection. So what we're going to be doing today is looking at how to make things move and create force through heat. So what we're going to do is create a really super nice little experiment that actually I think looks so lovely that you could use as a kind of table center decoration for your next family meal. So the first thing we're going to do is check we've got the right materials. So we need a big-ish stick, something, I've got a dowel here, but you could use a stick from a garden that's about 30 centimeters long and quite slim and ideally quite straight. A smaller stick, which could be like a twig, which is about 15 centimeters long. So we need those two things. We need some string, about 30 centimeters long, a piece of thread that's got a knot in the end, just so that can take some time and be a bit fiddly. So I suggest you do that, pause the video and do that, and thread the needle one end. You're going to need some sellotape. You're going to need something that is quite a weighty foundation. So I've got an empty bottle of wine here, which your grown-ups might have, you can borrow. Or you could use plastic, some other long bottle, if it's not very heavy though. So this one's made of glass, so it's quite heavy. If yours isn't heavy, you could fill it with some water to weigh it down, because this is going to be our anchor and we're going to create almost like a crane out of the top of that. You ideally want to have your STEMAZING spirals templates, which looks like this, and some colouring pens and pencils. And to create the heat source, I'm going to use a little tea light candle. And so this doesn't damage the table when I light it, I'm going to use one of my STEMAZING coasters to put that on. So you can use any candle, ideally as flat as possible, because we want as much space between the crane we create and the flame, so that our spiral template doesn't catch on fire if it's too close to the flame. So the smaller, sort of flatter the candle you can get, the better. Otherwise, you'll have to make your spiral shorter, but that's still doable. All right, so I think that's everything we need. So let's make a start. So we will start off with our two sticks and our string. And we want to connect these together to create what's called a cantilever beam. So we're going to connect them together where I've crossed them over with the string, so that we can then hang our spiral template off this end. So I'll angle the camera so you can see what I'm doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is take one end of the string and I'm going to tie a knot around the big stick, around the end of the big stick. So I just create a knot at the end there, which can be a bit fiddly. So take your time over that, so that that's around the end there. Then I'm going to put the smaller stick where I want it to be, so on the just crossed over like that. And then I'm going to thread my string around in a sort of crisscross pattern. So go around one side of that stick, around the other side of the stick there, and then loop back over. And I'm going to basically keep going round. You can do all sorts of different roundabout, crossed over, round, back again, crossed over, round, crossed over that way. The idea being that as we build this up, we're securing this stick to this stick. So as we go round, that's it, make it, try and pull on it a little bit to make it tight. So I'm going to go diagonally that way, then I'm going to cross over and I'm going to go diagonally that way. I'm going to go back round there, diagonally that way, back round there, diagonally that way, until I can get to a point where I can then tie a knot again with the two ends that are still sticking out. So if you tie another knot there, and we're not going to be hanging a big weight off this. Now this is kind of similar to cranes, where you've got the base of the crane and then you've got the lever arm sticking out of the crane. It can be like a cantilever. And you'd be hanging big weights off a crane, wouldn't you, normally? Whereas this is only going to have paper and thread hanging off it. So it doesn't have to be super strong. It just has to give us that distance out. Okay, so hopefully you can just see there that I've kind of, it's not perfect, but I've tied the string around to try and keep that relatively secure. All right, so once you've got your sticks into that nice cantilever beam shape. Then what we want to do is add this to our weighty bottle. So this is going to be the thing that stops it falling over because it's quite heavy. And we're just going to put that on the side there. So if I angle the camera up, you can see it's all the way up there. And we're going to put some sellotape around there to secure that in place. Okay, so get your sellotape. Quite a long bit to begin with, put it around there. And then I want to make sure that that's sticking out, pointing away from the bottle so that it's creating, so again, angle the camera so you can see that, so that I've got this coming across there. And then that's roughly in place. I'm going to add another bit of sellotape to hold that in place. And I might even just do one more super long bit of sellotape. And put that all the way around like that, so that's in place there. So once you've got your foundation, so your bottle like this with that coming off the top there, and that's fairly secure, that's not going to wobble around too much, then we'll put that to one side because we're going to use that again later. And the bit that we're going to do next is we're going to create a spiral from our template. And this is the really awesome bit of the experiment that we're going to then hopefully see, is the spiral moving without us touching it, just from the heat from the candle. And we'll talk about how that works. So I've put 2 different size spirals on this template. And obviously you could draw your own spiral as well, but sometimes that could be tricky. So I thought I'd give you your own template to begin with, then maybe you could try it again with your own spiral design afterwards. The reason why I put 2 different sizes is because if your bottle isn't as tall as mine, or if your sticks aren't as tall as mine, then you're going to have less space between the table and your top stick. So if you've got, also it depends how big your candle is. So if you've got a tall candle and a short bottle, you're going to have less space in the middle, in which case use the small spiral. But if, like me, you've got quite a tall bottle and quite a tall stick, then you can try using the bigger spiral. So I'll try using the bigger spiral, but if you think you've got less space there, depending on the size of the materials you're using, then try the small spirals first. Now we can always, with the spirals, shorten them after we've cut them out. Before we cut them out, let's use our creativity and create our unique designs on the spiral. So take your colouring pens or pencils, depending on which spiral you're going to use, you can choose which one to do your designs on. Now, make sure that you don't saturate this with colour, because it's only one thin bit of paper we've got here. So if you put too much ink on it, it's going to make it softer, because as it gets a bit wet, it's going to be softer. So that means the spiral will stretch out once you cut it. So I'm just going to do some extra lines on here, but I'm not going to colour it in solid block. I'm just going to really showcase this spiral shape. I'm going to do spirals in maybe 2 different colours. So I'm going to do blue and orange, I think. And then that's all the colour I'm going to put on there, because I don't want to saturate this paper and make it wet and sort of more floppy. And then it might extend more than I want it to once I cut it out. So there we go, that will do. So with those colours in place now, I'm going to cut along the thick black line. And you cut the edge off there. So I'm just going to cut along the thick black line to be able to cut this spiral out. So using your scissors nice and carefully. Now there's a number of things with this experiment that we need to be very careful about. Obviously using the fire at the end. Now we have to be super careful with that, and I don't want any children to be doing the fire bit on their own. You must have a grown-up present when you're doing that. And it's very important with this experiment that you never leave it unattended. So don't leave it with the paper spiral dangling down and the candle lit, because you never know what might happen. You don't want this to paper to set fire. So whilst you're sitting at your table and enjoying your family dinner and watching how clever you are with your STEMAZING creation and your creative convection experiment, then by all means have the candle lit. But when you walk away to go and help your grown-ups do the washing up, then you must blow the candle out. All right, so carry on cutting round the thick black line from the printout template. And once you've got all the way to the middle, there we go. So you should have something like this. There we go. So it looks like a coil that you've got there, okay? So now we've got this, we want to be able to attach the middle of this to our small stick that's our cantilever beam hanging away from our bottle. So the way we're going to attach this is that's where our thread comes into play. So we're going to get our thread with the needle on one end. Be very careful with these sharp needles. And what we're going to do on the other, so right in the middle of our spiral there, if we flip it over, and we want to get right in the middle there. So carefully, I'm putting my fingers either side of the middle, and then I'm just going to put the needle through, as if I was threading through a piece of cloth, through as close to the middle as I can there, and pull the thread through. And I've already knotted the end. I put a double knot in the end so that that won't come through the hole I've just made with the needle. So now you should be able to pull this up by the thread. There we go. And then we're going to take the needle out of the thread. So we've just got the thread on its own. And then we'll get our bottle back over with our cantilever beam at the top there. And we want to now work out what the best distance is. So how much string do we want dangling? Because if I show you the bottom, with the full length of string, this is actually touching the table, which is going to be too close. So if we do a test of where the candle is going to be, which is about there, so obviously I'm not lighting the candle now, I'm just doing a check for distance. I want the bottom of my spiral to be at least sort of like a finger length above the candle. So this is where you can measure it if you want. If you've got a ruler, you can measure, and you probably want at least 10 centimeters between the top of the candle and the bottom of your spiral. But we can always trim the spiral. That's the good thing about it being made out of paper. We can always trim that. So going back to the top, I'm going to connect this bit of thread to the top of my cantilever beam there by hooking it over and then wrapping it around a couple of times, carefully not to apply a lot of force to this because we haven't made that super strong. And then just to secure that in place, I'm going to put a bit of sellotape and fold that over the top where I've just wrapped that string around so that that holds that in place at the top there. And now I'm going to have a look at this, and I think mine is, I think I'm just going to trim the very bottom of my spiral just to make that a little bit shorter. So I'm going to trim that very bottom bit and take a little bit off there so that it springs up a little bit higher. There we go. So I'm happy with that now. And so for you, it's better to do an experiment where you've got a bit more space than not enough space, just in case you find that when you light the candle, you don't want the flame to be near the paper. So now we've done that, let's have a look now. I'm going to take the candle away on the mat, and I'm going to carefully light the candle over here. Now that candle's lit, I'm going to slide it carefully back under my spiral, and you should see it start to go round. How awesome is that? And that is just because we're heating up the air from the candle, and that air rising is pushing on our spiral and making it spin round. How awesome is that? Now, because we've attached it at the top by the string, you'll probably see the string start to wind itself up. And when the resistance in the string gets too much for the force coming from the heat of the air, then it will stop spinning round. So see, mine stopped spinning now. So if I move the candle out of the way carefully, it will stop spinning, and then it will spin the other way, and it will start to unwind itself. And you can see that in the string. The string is actually winding itself up and then unwinding itself. So now it's unwinding itself just under the gravity, the weight of the spiral on the thread is starting to unwind itself. And then when you see it all unwind there, then we can try again and put the candle back under. So now the candle is heating the air again, and there it goes. It's awesome, isn't it? So what's happening here? What do you think is happening? As the candle comes into contact with the air around the candle, the air is getting warmer. It's making the air molecules jump all around. And so as the air molecules jump around and they get more energy in them, they separate out. So it makes that bit of air less dense. And we know that when things are less dense, they float up. So that air is going up because it's less dense. And that's what's pushing on the spiral to go up. But then when the air gets to the top, it's already started to cool down, so it falls back down again. And then the candle heats it up again, and then it rises up again. So although you can't see it, this is called a convection current in the air. The air is traveling up and then falling back down again as it cools. Then it's heated and it rises up, then it cools and it comes back down again. So that's what's making our convection current, and that's what's making the spiral go round and round. And this is something we see in nature, in fact, in the earth all around us. So convection currents are the reason why we have hot and cold parts of the sea that moves currents in the sea. Like the Gulf Stream is the hot bit, which then travels and takes all the nutrients with it in the sea so that you get the diverse wildlife in the sea. You see convection currents in weather systems. We even see convection currents in things like in the Earth's crust. So if you got deep in the Earth, the heat from the core of the Earth heats up that molten part of the Earth. And then you see these convection currents happening in the Earth, which actually then moves the tectonic plates. It's that force from the convection currents in the liquid in the Earth, in the molten rock, that then causes the movement of the tectonic plates in the Earth. So there's convection currents in action all around us all the time. And that is just purely from heat. That's super, super awesome. I love it. So this is something that you can hopefully create yourself, one of these, and you could try different sizes of spirals, different thicknesses, see what works best. Like I said, don't saturate the spiral with too much colouring pens or stickers and things that are going to weigh it down unless you make the paper thicker and then it's stiffer, because otherwise it will just all fall down and it won't be in the spiral shape anymore. And you can see how long it takes your spiral to wind itself all the way up, and then take your candle away and let it unwind itself. And then you can put it back up again and watch it wind itself up without you touching it. And I think this makes an awesome table centre decoration that you can impress your whole family with and explain how you can be creative with convection. So there we go. All right, STEMAZINGKids, hope you've enjoyed that one, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.